Okay.
Thank you all for coming. This is terrific. I've been reading at the Gloucester Writers Center for many years, and it's really helped me become more of a writer than I started out being, cutting out the nonsense and the unnecessary. And I'm writing now primarily flash fiction, which is fiction in about 1,000 words or less. I published 60 stories, so that's 60,000 words. Somebody tells me that could be a novel, but it's not. The Pompitous of Love is a compilation of 60 of those stories, 60 of the 150 or so stories that I published on the Catfish Review. And I picked 4 of the stories, all from the book. And as I told Adam, I love them all, but I kind of love these the best. I have 5 kids and I love all of them the best too. This is a story called The Mating Habits of Whooping Cranes. Unlike whooping cranes, who, according to his daughter Prudence, mate for life, Dan Feldman is hopelessly, shamelessly, and serially unfaithful. Prue is a precocious 3rd grader who now lives with her mother, Dan's first wife, in Parsippany, New Jersey. Dan sees Prue on alternate weekends and on the high holy days when they fall in odd-numbered months. Dan is fast approaching 50 and would be the first to admit that he's the sole cause of the impending demise of his 2nd marriage. He is just wired differently. He has a reflexive, subcognitive nerve circuit that instantaneously transmits nubile female images from his eyes directly to his loins and then up to his heart, entirely bypassing and willfully subverting the scrutiny of any higher rational brain centers. He is no dummy. He majored in journalism at Hopkins. He teaches creative writing at Forest Hills High School to rather well-off adolescents whose parents both read hardcover books and pay cash for their children's orthodontia. He likes it all well enough on most days, and on others, he adequately pretends to. His adorable 2-year-old twins, Max and Minnie, share a room in their 3-bedroom apartment in Hollis, Queens. Mirabelle, Dan's chaste, thin-lipped current wife of 34, who, when they first met, was like a rare and outstanding kosher Cabernet, a woman with a big nose and a full body. She sleeps now each night in her own bedroom, claiming that his snoring drives her insane. Dan is sure that this condition befell her long before he met her on J-Date, shortly over 3 years ago. What drives Dan insane now, assuredly, is the smooth curve of his Fit Before 50 aerobic yoga instructor's bottom. She is tight, trim, and 22. Admittedly, so totally not interested in him, and so is not even remotely within his reach. Soma Hatfield McCoy, though, is the new true love of his life. On her Facebook page, she bears a remarkably striking resemblance to a 20-ish Valerie Bertinelli. Her raven hair, her lips like glazed raspberries, and her eyes like wet walnuts have captured his yearning heart. She is an unbelievably remarkable woman. A Fulbright scholar with a degree in helping others, she volunteers at the local hospice 3 evenings a week and serves meals in a mobile soup kitchen on the other 2 nights. She loves dancing in the rain and says her favorite food is to be surprised by anything you would like to cook for me. Soma has sent Dan a warm and enthusiastic
Oh,
"I'm
good.
all yours" response to his personal profile posting on mysterymeat.com, the .com you need when your life deserves more than just a match, which is exactly what Dan desires and feels he deserves, to experience once again that florid flush of gland grinding, full-throated, old-time, real-time lust. In less than a week of fervent texts, Soma has promised him all of that and more. She has it all: the allure of a girlish innocence, the tenderness of vulnerability, and the full promise of luscious, unbridled abandon. They have agreed to meet this coming Wednesday night at Sweet Basil in the West Village, after her regularly scheduled monthly blood donation at Children's Hospital. This meetup, of course, has little chance of happening. Soma, you see, has sent Dan a text this afternoon describing in detail what she'll be wearing when they meet, and the notification has popped up on his iPhone. This has gladdened his heart. At the very same instant, though, in the rolling hills of Parsippany, the same text notification has appeared on his laptop. The very same laptop he loaned to Prue this weekend so that she could work on her research project on the mating habits of whooping cranes for her 3rd grade class. Prue asks her mom what a cream-colored crocheted cami you could just die for really looks like. Her mom, with great gratification, immediately placed the call to Mirabelle, who has now packed Dan's underwear, a toothbrush, 1 clean button-down shirt, his rumpled collection of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues, and his bundle of anime cartoon books in an overnight bag. This, along with a creased coupon for one-time only 2-for-1 discount on White Castle burgers, the phone number of Myron Rosenblatt, her attorney, and the new 2017 edition of Matrimony, Volume 2, From Acrimony to Alimony, a guide for dummies, all of which she has left in the building lobby with Enrique, their implacable and well-muscled doorman, who, no doubt, has long seen all of this coming. This one is called On the Third Day. On the 3rd day, God created the seas. The seas covered the entire earth, and the seas were good. Not exactly 100% good, but okay good. It was all according to the design specs, but now seeing it in person, after having created the dark and then the light and the firmament and the earth and all, it was just water. And so his shoulders dropped and a frown came over his thin, innocent, boyish face. The water looked great. Don't get him wrong, it was clear and blue, and he could see his toes all the way down to the bottom of the deepest part. This was, of course, before he created plastic and the Deepwater Horizon and sulfates and pop tops. But the design flaw he saw in the immense flat expanse way out to the edge was that the water on one side of the earth was getting way too hot, while the water on the other side got so cold that you couldn't even dip your big toe in it. So he gave the earth a little nudge, and it started to spin. And lo and behold, the spin made the water mix, and it made currents like El Niños, and the currents were good. So while he was figuring out what to create next, he took to throwing rocks into the water, watching how they plunked in and made the water kind of ripple out in circles, and ripples were good. In fact, they were totally cool, and he was glad he had created them. So he dumped in like a ton of really big rocks, and eureka, he had made waves. And he said to himself, eureka. This was actually the first time he came up with that word, and he would no doubt use it again, like when he created Malamars and origami and strawberry rhubarb pie and polynomials and those little helicopter thingies from the trees you can stick on your nose. Eureka, he thought. The waves crashed up against the rocks, and he kept chucking in more and more rocks, and voila, the waves got huge and started to make groovy sounds, which he had never heard before. And he came up with the words like dude and epic and gnarly and totally tubular and bikinis even. So while he was grooving to the sound of the waves, he realized he was getting no work done. And he knew his father would get on his case about that, and it hit him that he had like only 4 more days for the whole project. 3 if you subtracted Sunday. His father would call him a slacker, and like after he had let Mars, or was it Mercury, nearly burned to a crisp like a cinnamon raisin bagel left in the toaster too long while you were in the other room watching TV. And the waves kept crashing and smashing and pulverizing the big rocks until the pieces got so teeny tiny they started making islands and sticking up out of the water like dunes. So when you walked on them, the sand would get in your sandals and stuck between your toes. And then you would track them into the kitchen, and your mother would completely lose it on you because the mess you were making on the floor she had just cleaned up, and say, "You had better clean that up, mister, before your father gets home." And so God was a little unhappy. He was under a great deal of pressure. The workload was huge. There were scads of proto-galaxies waiting for him. But there was a tiny voice that whispered in his ear, "Listen, God, chill. No biggie, man. This sandy beach thing was awesome. Kick back, man. You earned it. Sure, you got stuff to do, but there's more to life than just work." And so God paused. He cleared a place in the sand and sat and watched the huge, curling, foamy top turquoise waves pound against the shore, and smelled the salty air, and saw the weightless mist rise and make clouds, and saw how the breezes would blow, and how people, when he got around to creating people, could bring their lunches and potato chips and beer and Budweiser coolers and spend afternoons in the summer and pay someone $25 or some outrageous amount just to park their car in a gravelly parking lot, and they would have to walk up the wooden path just to get to the water and get splinters in their feet, and then the seagulls would come. And they would break into the bags of Cheetos and get the sand all over them so they couldn't chew them anymore without grinding their teeth and spitting them out. And then the greenheads would come, and they would have to pack everything up before it rained and go home and watch TV or mow the lawn or walk the dog or do homework or the laundry before they took a nap on the couch before dinner. And God saw that it was good. and he was happy. And in the micro fraction of a milli God second, he turned to digging holes and planting gobs of quinoa and acorns and marigolds and coconuts all over the place. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. Thank you. So much of what we write, I write, is based on memories and memoir, and you think you're going to remember everything for the rest of your life and all. So this is a story called The Girl with Ruby Red Lips. You're going to forget people. You think you never will, but trust me, you will. You'll lose track of them, and then you'll forget them. You forget things too, like how many ounces are in a pound of cottage cheese, or if you've had breakfast. But like I said, you think it's not going to happen. And then you grow up and you go to college and you meet someone, and maybe you have kids, and you go hiking in the Adirondacks and your parents die. And then you find yourself sitting in a wheelchair at a table in a blue painted room with palm trees stenciled all over the walls, with 3 other people who you don't recognize wearing sunglasses inside. And there are posters on the wall with saying today's date on them, and the names of everyone with a birthday that week. And a woman with an accent like a song puts a plate of baked salmon with parsleyed potatoes and 3 sweet gherkins down in front of you and tells you to eat it all up, just like a good boy. And then, if you are anything like me, the aroma of those sweet gherkins will make you think of your friend Teddy Ackerman, who was not so good at geometry, but he surely could play the piano. And how Mr. Magooly would throw a piece of chalk at him and say, "Hey, piano boy, how many angles in an isosceles triangle?" And Teddy would say, isosceles? And duck his head behind the 3-ring binder. And how after school we'd stop at Logue's Deli and buy a small container of sweet gherkins, and then study geometry together on his back porch while his sister would be sitting on the low bench at the black piano with her straight back and dark brown hair pinned up and back with a small silver comb, and her long fingers on the keys, and not look up when we came into the house. She was a senior that year, and she wore black skirts with nylons and white blouses and collars and buttons in the front. And everyone in school talked about how she made out with the music teacher so he could get her into Smith College, and she'd be a famous opera singer one day. Teddy's house had 3 floors and a driveway that went from one street to another. And his father had a big belly, and he smoked cigars and took the train into the city. His mother stayed home and fretted. She told us not to make a mess with the gherkins, and she put tea towels down on our laps and waited until we said, "Thank you, Mrs. Ackerman." And when she opened the patio door, we could hear Eleanor playing the piano and singing. And I'd think about how red her lips were and how she made them into an O before she sang. And I'd imagine old Mr. D'Anto making out with her, standing in the band room with the music stands and the chairs all around with them and the lights off, and how it might feel to have my hand touching her back and feel the cotton of her blouse against her warm skin, and the touch of her breasts against me like 2 round scoops of vanilla ice cream, and how she would make her lips into an O and kiss me, and how my mouth would feel with them on mine, and smell her lipstick and how the muscles in my stomach would get all tight and it would be hard to breathe and how my head would feel light. And I would close my eyes and I would want to be nowhere else in the whole world, but right there in the band room kissing Teddy's sister. And we'd never get caught and no one would ever know. And I would remember how it felt for the rest of my life. And before you pick up one of those gherkins and put it into your mouth, it all comes back to you. And you can feel the glands in the back of, way in the back of your mouth, under your tongue, squeezing like lemons. And like out from nowhere, you remember studying geometry, the way Teddy's sister played piano in the other room, and how that would make you feel. And then the woman with the voice like a song says to you, Mr. Marty, you should eat your salmon before the gherkins because the salmon is good for your brains. And you say to her, Philistine, please tell me, is there a girl here with ruby red lips, a little older than me, by the name of Eleanor? And she tells you, first, Mr. Marty, my name is Ernestine. Second, there's no one here older than you. And third, no, there is no one here by the name of Eleanor. And fourth, you tell me that same question every time we have salmon with gherkins for dinner. So now I tell you, go and eat your salmon like I told you, and forget about the girl with them red lips. Okay. This story, the last one, bear with me. This is the title of the book. I mean, this is the story of, on the title of the book, The Pompitous of Love. And don't tell me your stories about Steve Miller. I'm in the backyard raking leaves with Ezra. He's home from school for winter break. Till he meets up with his girlfriend and they then drive back down to school again together. I like her. I'm glad for him. He's crazy about her. When they're together, they never leave one another's side, as if some silent centripetal force is spinning them closer and closer and closer together. It's been wet for the last few weeks, and the leaves are matted and dark and pressed flat against the ground. And when we rake them up, the grass underneath is soft and tender green, not dried up and thin like the faded rye bread color on the other exposed parts of the lawn. Why do you think the grass is so green under there? He says to me. I don't know, maybe it's warmer under the leaves and dark and the grass greens up a little like it does in the spring. So why do we rake them? What do you mean? Why don't we just leave them covered up like that all winter? Like if we weren't around. I like the way he thinks. I like the way his mind holds something up and turns it around just to see what's on the other side. So why don't you do it? What's it good for? You mean, is it good for the grass? Yes, he says. Or is it aesthetics? His voice has deepened over the years since he's been away. His cadence has slowed, a thoughtful, considered pace. I look around. The neighbors had their lawns raked and blown twice already, before we've even brought our softening pumpkins to the transfer station. Aesthetics, I guess. We hear a car, and we both look to follow the sound. When his mother pulls up to the curb, his blue eyes widen. A small curve comes to the corners of his mouth, just like hers does. His cheeks round. He's a beautiful boy. He loves his mother, He loves her in a way that I cannot know. He's loved her from the moment he took his first breath. As he was settled against her tired chest, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing, feeling the first touch of her skin. Its sweet, pleasant smell will be with him until the day he dies. A guide for him, a touchstone for his life. Between them is a calibration of love that occurred in that very instant, a synchrony of their biological reference points, their first shared recognition of an unshakable, wordless, eternal bond. I love her too, perhaps in many of the same ways he does, and then in other different ways, ways he will too someday with someone else. Maybe someone who smiles like she does, maybe not. But there will be something from her in it. For me, it was a slower walk to love her, this same woman, slowly, constantly, gravitationally almost. A willing, steady recognition of love for each other, a redefinition of what it means to love someone, a narrowing of the distance between us until being next to her was the only place I ever wanted to be. Sharing a border like the ocean and the shore, the only thing separating is an understanding that they are separate and inseparable, only definable in relation to one another. Not enough is said about how two people come to one another, to care for one another more than you care for oneself, to reach out for one another, to watch them as they grow and change. Thank you.